Thank you to Callstack for having me. My name is David Rifkin. I work in developer relations for Embrace. We are a user-focused, specifically web and mobile-focused observability company. And I'm here to talk to you today about React Native observability, mobile observability with OpenTelemetry. If you don't know what OpenTelemetry is, that's okay, because when I was writing this earlier, I got those red squiggly lines underneath the word. So Google also doesn't know what it is. Don't worry about it. So let me remember how to press the buttons here. Next, there we go. Cool. So a quick rundown of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk a bit about observability in a mobile ecosystem. So for React Native, for mobile, and then just users broadly. I'm going to talk about how we learn from those production systems. Can everyone see this okay? I know there's a lot of light behind it. Great. And then we'll talk through a shared language, the telemetry ecosystem that's emerging as the standard. It's very exciting. That's OpenTelemetry. And then we'll touch on some ways that React devs can use that standard to solve those observability problems and make sense of both native JS layers that they're working on. So first, observability for React Native. I want to just quickly pin down what observability is. It's not monitoring. Boop, sorry. It's using the technical details of what happened to ensure that the user experience is solid. So when we're talking about user experiences, they're not experienced on the service level like your backend might be. Am I moving my head a little too much? Am I doing a little too much talk? All right. They're on the client. Everyone who's ever had a phone can point to a scenario where they've had an issue with an app, or if you were an app developer, you might have found out something was broken in prod, or that people couldn't fix an action based entirely on people's feedback, not technical information, on feedback. The goal here should be to reach into that system and find out what's happening to users before you get that feedback. And that is the ability to make sense of live production data. That is observability. Mobile apps, where you're writing that React Native code, are a system unto themselves. So observability, the textbook definition is making sense of systems in production. That's nice, tidy, great. But our mobile apps are not just the apps that we write. They are the devices that they're on. They're the human beings that are using them. They're the network requests that are going out over Wi-Fi. Observability means making sense of everything that happened to the user using the device and the services that it had to interact with and the databases that are backing all of that, and then bubbling that back up to learn whether or not you succeeded in what you wanted the user to do. So that's tough because the client is affected by everything before it. And then there's everything happening on the client. There's the code level, whether your promise returned, whether you fumble the network response. There's the level of abstraction above that. You might have issues with your navigation being triggered in the wrong order, might not be interacting with the Redux store in a way that was correct. You might have, I wanted to say pervert your data. If someone has a better word for that, please let me know. And then you're also dealing with the physical world. So your request might not even make it off the device, or you might enter a part of the world with limited location capabilities, let's say, or the operating system on your Android or Apple computer might have just said, I'm going to terminate the process. We're not doing that anymore. So at the end of the day, the whole system can work perfectly fine, but if your user can't hit the pedal, then they're not going to be able to drive the car. And that's incredibly important because on mobile, that's where most of the interactions and digital consumer activity is. World's mobile first. Revenue depends on a great user experience. And so that means you want to improve that user experience. You want to monitor it. You want to measure it. You want to mitigate any issues as quickly as possible before they become an issue for everyone. You don't want the feedback you get to be the App Store reviews with a 1 star. You want to see that something happened that might have stopped someone in their track and made them want to give that 1 star, but roll out a fix already. So that's observability from the mobile, the user-centric side. Next, I'm going to point to a very technical document about the state of mobile observability versus backend observability. It looks sort of like this. The picture is just not as well developed on the mobile side. Backend observability is quite mature. Vendors have been standardizing for a while around a specific model and set of tools that we'll talk about in a sec. But we can't quite replicate what those backend systems are doing because they're meant to be always on services, doing the same thing, dealing with the same inputs, outputs. Mobile's a little more dynamic. Excuse me. So the nice thing is that standard that they're all moving to actually creates an opportunity for mobile developers. That opportunity is OpenTelemetry. I'm going to talk a little bit about OpenTelemetry. I promise this is not from a textbook. It's just how it works, and it's kind of cool. But basically, it's a shared data standard that is a set of frameworks that you can put in your app to generate, collect, transmit, make sense of telemetry. And telemetry here just means stuff that you collected in flight, like think of a spaceship. Telemetry is just data they get from the spaceship, same with your apps. The goal here is that transmission of information from any app, whether it's a front-end application, a database, CI/CD, mobile applications, web apps, it should all look the same so that developers are free to take it in, make sense of it however they want, with whatever tools they think are best for the job, regardless of the bias of potentially a vendor or an open source solution. The goal is get the data in a format you expect it, and then learn from it in the way that you want. And that's the really special part about it. It's a pretty broad ecosystem, but if I could break it down, there are 3 layers to it. There's the specification, which is just a document that says, here's how it should work. Here's a standardized set of signals that you collect. Then below that, it's going to be the implementation, which is making that spec, that document, work for a specific programming language. And then below that would be instrumentation, which is actually a lot more fun. It's where opportunity is. Those are frameworks and libraries for specific use cases. So maybe these use cases are not in the spec, but they reflect the specific need of a specific part of the ecosystem. So let's dive in. We're going to get right into this funnel. The top of the funnel, specification, this just gives shape to the tools. So when you're using OpenTelemetry, an application is translating the app activity into signals that'll be transmitted. And all of those activities are shaped in a specific way. So we listed here traces, logs, metrics. If you're not familiar with those are the main signals for now. Those are the tools. A trace is just the beginning and end of an operation. Maybe there are nested operations within it. And what you want to know is the technical details of a specific, I don't want to say operation again, specific workflow that you can link all of those time-based start and stop measurements with additional contextual information to learn what happened in the system. Logs, people might be a little more specifically familiar with this. You want to get a point-in-time message about something that happened. Think about what you output to console. You might want to do that in production. You might want to send it to your backend. And then a metric, measurement, send that value somewhere. All OpenTelemetry compliant apps will do this. So there will be traces, logs, metrics in anything using OpenTelemetry. And that's the next section, which hops us into the implementation. So those were all really fancy words, really nice concepts. At the next level, we're implementing in every language that might want to get production data the concepts from the spec. So we don't just have traces, we have traces in JavaScript. We have logs in JavaScript. We have metrics in JavaScript. Or they're in Go, or they're in Java, or they're in Swift. At the language level, these will always be evolving, I guess, or some are incomplete, I might say. But the goal is that you're able to use those tools from the spec in an app written in that language. There's a little bit of limitation here. You're going to get an API. It's going to let you create traces, logs, metrics. But thinking of JavaScript specifically, there is a JavaScript API and an SDK for OpenTelemetry. How many of you all write apps purely in JavaScript? Do you use any frameworks? Yeah. So I think specifically with JavaScript, where we might have too broad of a situation with our language implementations, and where we might want to dive a little deeper is frameworks are a little more scattered. Some Node stuff works, some React stuff works. We've actually contributed some React Native stuff for the demo projects. But basically, if we want to get a little deeper, if we want to get into the specific things happening in apps, that's where we need instrumentation libraries. So with OTel, once we get into the specifics of stuff like networking on an Android client, we've left the world of the implementation. We've gotten into specific libraries for instrumenting those things. And so if there's a use case that exists purely in one domain, like rendering views, you should create or use an instrumentation library, which will automatically shape whatever it picks up from the client back into traces, logs, or metrics. So for the last part, let's talk about where the opportunity is for React Native devs. The last step there was kind of key. I do need some help reading this graphic. But if I understand it right, most of the issues developing React Native are not necessarily in the code that you've built, but it's actually in all the things that you're bringing in. If you want to get key information from something like your Expo builds or pod files, these specific one-off use cases, why did this break? Well, I get that some of these are build time issues, but if you brought a package in, you might want to wrap it in an instrumentation library so that you can be emitting things like traces about, let's say, navigation. If you brought in a React Native navigation library and you want to know where did people end up or what went wrong, it'd be great to just build a package that goes into your app that will tell you that, instead of at each point in your app when you navigate, send some sort of signal. So OTel's instrumentation libraries can create open source support for anything you want to do, or if you want to build it, then you can share it back out. That's the joy of open source. To give some more concrete examples, when I said a trace has a start and an end, you might think of that as a stopwatch, or you might think of it as measuring the beginning of your navigation to the arrival at your next navigation point in your app. And that gives you a sense of how long did it take to render the next view. Gives you a sense of what's going on in your stack. Or a log, which might be a message in the abstract, can also be a critical alert telling you, hey, here's some critical information right now. Someone tried to buy something. It didn't work. You probably want that information live and in production. And so where we end up, the opportunities for OTel, truly anything your team or you want to measure in production. So because observability is for apps, apps tend to be built by teams. Whatever your team is trying to solve in production, you might want to get information about it. Then you might want to contribute back a library to do that. So some examples here for React Native specific people. If you want to wrap Redux to learn how those operations are functioning in production, learn where things are going wrong, learn where you've destroyed data locally, or if you want to learn the interaction between the JS and the mobile layers at the native level, the goal is that you using these instrumentation libraries, you can solve an actual problem your team is running into by getting that information from production. And then if you've done it in a standardized way, you could probably contribute it back. The list of things you could do here are probably endless. And so, I hope this is a good starting point for everyone with OpenTelemetry. Thank you.